First, I just want to acknowledge that we're on the traditional lands of the Gadigal people of Eora Nation and pay my respects to elders past, present and future. I also want to pay my respects to any First Nations people here in the room today as well. And I think it's appropriate, the discussion we're about to have. In the past week, the Productivity Commission released its review into the Closing the Gap report. And I'm just going to bring out a couple of quotes I've been reading in what their analysis said. Most critically, the agreement requires government decision makers to accept that they do not know what is best for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Efforts to improve outcomes are far more likely to succeed when Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people lead their design and implementation. Nothing will change until this model of partnership based on genuine power sharing becomes the rule and not the exception. I think that's going to be really playing through to the discussion we're just about to have, because it was discussed yesterday about, we need to do that community engagement, but actually, are we doing it well? And we're really lucky because we've got 4 amazing people here who are actually doing it. They're doing best practice in their communities, which is genuine, leading to genuine outcomes and something that we can actually learn upon. So I'm just going to actually start straight with Maddie, because congratulations. You just actually got the Jill Owen Scholarship. Also, just everyone be nice as well to Maddie, because you just flew in from a wedding from...
In Queenstown.
Yeah, so to be here today. So thanks, Maddie.
That's fine.
But I just wondered if you want to talk about a little bit the work Original Power is actually doing with communities in the Northern Territory, and just talk a bit more like what is working and what's not working.
Yeah, sure. And I almost want to say that with those quotes alone, I don't need to say much more, but that's right, we will, because it absolutely nails it. So Original Power is an Indigenous owned and led non-profit that works with communities to develop renewable community energy programs and systems for their own communities. Now, what's really important in the work that we do is it starts with community co-design. So it's not just consulting, you are designing the systems with the communities. So we do go out into remote communities, we do sit down with traditional owners, with interested parties. We open up to all of community, please come on down and let's have a talk about what you want to see in your community. We talk through new technologies and we talk through what's possible. What's also really important, I think, as well, is making sure you're baking in good governance from the start. So we work really hard on establishing a steering committee and then doing capacity development and building with community members along the way. And that needs to start as early as possible. And baking in direct community benefit. Sponsoring football jerseys isn't enough anymore. We're not doing what the gas industry did. We need to make sure there's a tangible reduction of the cost of energy in communities. That's not just Indigenous communities, but that's especially in vulnerable Indigenous communities. I'd also say that it's really important, and what we have found is working, is ensuring that we get really creative about how we make sure that technology stops being punitive. So in a lot of Indigenous communities, we have these prepay meters that are quite punitive and don't operate in a way that consumers on the East Coast would ever experience. And making sure that we're innovating in a way that it actually unlocks revenue and cost reduction opportunities for community as well. So we can talk about that later. We're working on a cooperative model at the moment with communities to co-own and have a stake, an ownership model and an ownership opportunity in their projects. And I think if we look to our brothers and sisters over in Turtle Island, or also known as Canada, it's very clear that not just on a community scale, but on large solar and wind farm scales, there's great opportunity for Indigenous communities to own and operate and receive revenue and economic development opportunities from the whole swath, whole scale, from community right up to utility scale of projects. So we just need to get to the business of obligating ourselves to that.
So, Erin, I'm going to throw over to you. So you work for the ACT government. It's made a commitment for electrification by 2045. You're overseeing like the marketing and communications and community engagement on that. Can you just tell about the work that you're doing and what you're seeing in the first year running this sort of program?
Sure. I'm also painfully or acutely aware that I'm the only government person on this panel, so I do have a policy position that we also have to promote. But I guess setting the scene about where ACT is, and everyone, it's been talked about a fair bit. So we have a very firm policy intention to electrify the city. We also have a lot of advantage within the city. We've had long-term goals set in place for a long time to decarbonise, but we also have lots of geographic and demographic advantage that other states and jurisdictions and communities don't have. So I guess that often puts us as in a position where we test a lot of things, we can be really agile. So my role is to, one of the projects that I look after is to educate, motivate and drive the behavioural change program to get consumers to electrify their homes, which is a pretty complex, wicked challenge. So we announced it in 2022 that we were going to electrify, and ACT will be launching its, I guess, full pathway to deliver that later this year. So last year was essentially year one of our education program. So of a 23-year behavioural change program that we need to undertake. So that's pretty bloody scary. So we engaged in a lot of market research to better understand the challenges, barriers and motivations to transition across multiple segments, so different income levels, different demographics, and also ACT, while small, has lots of different cultural clusters as well of how they operate. So I do see some Canberra colleagues around here. North of the lake operates different to south of the lake. It's no different in any other cities. And some of the barriers, which people talked about, no different, but cost, convenience, time to transition. And we really looked at those, particularly from those personas yesterday, for those change-ready audiences, because those are the people that ACT government really need to do the transition themselves, fund the transition themselves. So in the current, I guess, policy position, ACT is reliant on a consumer-led transition, so then we can focus our supports and more targeted outreach to audiences who can't transition themselves, so whether that's renters, those living in apartment buildings, those who have other challenges, so culturally and linguistically diverse communities, and also lower income households. So in year one, we were able to utilise these insights and really focused on what educational interventions we could take to address these barriers. So we've stood up a multifaceted education program called Make Your Next Choice Electric, which unfortunately has now picked up an internal working title of MINTS. It's everywhere. And I guess it has two aims. So that sort of broader government raising awareness of this policy intention. So the government's heading towards an electrification pathway. You will need to make your next choice electric. So we're really encouraging households to swap out your gas appliance at the time when it is right for you, which is when your gas appliance breaks down. And we also really talk about, we are well on the path of having a number of programs, rebates, incentives targeted towards this. But our story is also one of energy efficiency as well. So I think it was talked about yesterday, you can't electrify without plugging the holes, sealing the gaps. So in this market research, and so one of the things I'll really talk about is a tool that we've stood up as part of this education program. So I guess a direct quote, I want the government to help me on my way. Perhaps not a one-stop shop, but I guess a first-stop shop. Then make it easy for me to take the next step. I don't have the time to research what electric appliances are the best on the market, what might fit my budget. I really want to do it, but God, that's really that next step to take action. I mean, I trust someone like Choice. I'm keen to see a show of hands. Has most people heard of Choice magazine as a independent, you go there for independent reviews. So that's exactly what we did. I picked up the phone one day and called someone at Choice and said, hello, would you like to partner with ACT government? I literally called their media team. Got this strange proposal. Would you like to partner with ACT government? We're creating a home electrification tool, and what we really want to do is provide independent advice around the best electric appliances you can buy on the market that currently sit behind a paywall in low, medium, high budgets. People have told us this is a really big barrier. So we did that. We built it in 4 months at a pretty skinny budget, and we've built a pretty detailed, personalised tool that gives a fairly detailed estimate of how much a household could save on their annual energy bill per appliance, and it's personalised right down to size of household, how many people, if they have solar, what concessions they have as well, how old the house is, the age of gas appliance. And we equate this to, I guess, having a bushfire plan. So you're readying yourself for your energy transition. And at the very end, you get to see, which usually sits behind a paywall, what are the best appliances that fit your budget. So we've integrated that choice experience. So we've seen some pretty incredible uptake of the tool. I guess through this, we did invest in, I guess, a 6-week multifaceted education campaign, so tool at the hub of it, but we did community outreach. We did shopping centre pop-ups to promote mints. We went into community groups, etc. And we've seen 6% of households in that 6-week period actually get to the end point of printing out a plan, so producing a plan. And some of the data that we've seen, so I guess the average savings that we've seen per household who've completed a plan, so $1,200 a year that they could save. In terms of emissions reduction, so just under 100 tonnes of carbon dioxide. And we also did some pre and post measurements because data got to, sing for more budget. Ask my ministers for more budget all the time. We've also seen, I guess, a 10% uptick, so pre going into market and running this education campaign. So we've seen, So close to 4 in 10 gas network households are planning to switch to electric. So that increased by 10% after we ran that 6-week campaign. So I think a test bed, and we're really excited to, I guess, take that to an always-on sort of approach for us, for ACT government.
Thanks, Erin. And you talked then the really importance of an independent voice, and Asha, the Sydney Community Forum has just been doing amazing work for nearly 7-8 years for the Voices for Power program that's been working in Western Sydney. It's been, I know, inspiration for me in the work that we've been doing at Merri-bek. Do you just want to talk about a bit of the program and also, what do you see that we need to do as well into the future?
Yeah. I'm a first-generation migrant, and I happen to also have the privilege of leading a for-purpose community development organisation. A small but mighty organisation is how we see ourselves. And what I know is that my community, the Fiji Indian community, is concentrated in Western and Southwestern Sydney. And I was constantly having conversations with them about heat waves and the impact of them living with the reality that they were in rentals, they didn't have any standards, most of them didn't have air conditioning. And the Sydney Community Forum is a founding member of the Sydney Alliance. It's a civil society coalition. So we began to have some conversations in the Alliance about building migrant communities' power. So the Voices for Power project is a play on words, and it's also got a radical agenda. It is to train, listen, organise, build leadership, to exercise power and influence politically, and take action on climate justice and energy equity. So we're unashamedly building the power of migrant communities. In some electorates, migrants are 85% of that electorate, and all the politicians are hungry for their vote. I got sick and tired of my community being asked for a photo opportunity at election time. And people told me they were sick and tired of being consulted and never getting a result. Mm-hmm. And so my thing was, let's work with our communities as people who actually are from the community. So we listened. The Voices of Power project is a project of the Sydney Alliance. It's bigger than Sydney Community Forum, but we lead it, and we lead it because it matters to us, because an organisation like ours can carry it and make sure that it doesn't get lost in some of the other things that come up as a priority in civil society. So we hold that accountability in the Alliance around the Voices for Power migrant community. So what can I tell you about what we've done? We listened to hundreds and hundreds of migrants throughout Western and Southwestern Sydney. We held table talks. People told us what was happening to them, what their priorities were, and we asked them questions related to the environment. And by the way, I had somebody say to me, migrants don't care about the environment. They never get involved in climate change stuff. I'm like, I'm in my skin. What are you talking about? I helped to set up the Newcastle Greens, you know? But that whole thing about, I am not flattered when people tell me, oh, I don't see you as a migrant. My thing is, what? Are you bloody blind? Of course, I'm a migrant. I just happen to be an educated one. And my idea about this work is to use my power and privilege. I have a little bit of power and quite a bit of privilege to work in solidarity with people, Anglo leaders in the Alliance, to open doors. And I continuously say to some of my white colleagues, I don't need your guilt, please. That's so self-indulgent. Just use your power for good, okay? Open that door so we can walk in. And I've been saying that for all the years I've worked in the community sector. I don't resent or envy your power and privilege. I'm in awe of it, and I want some of that for my community. So please, use it for good. You'll feel better. I'll feel good. So, we've listened, and what did they say, our communities? We don't understand the energy system. Back home where I come from, we steal energy. Right? If you've ever been to India, it's true. And what do you mean I can't just go in there and wire things up so that I can reduce my energy bill? I don't want to pay that much to those greedy companies. And so what we do is listen and then develop through research action teams that is comprised of community leaders and experts. And the experts come from member organisations of the Alliance, the National Tertiary Education Union. And we came up with a roadmap based on the priorities that the communities identified. A, we want to understand the energy system. We want to reduce our bills. We want to do something about these horrible places that we live in, the places that have no green canopy cover, those places that are talked about but are not lived in by people like you. You know? So people who live in Blacktown, people who live in Mount Druitt, like Shaker did, he is sick of being talked about. What he wants is for the young people in his community to have purpose, to feel they can do something about the challenges of living in Mount Druitt. And they want to feel powerful in being able to shape their priorities, getting some investment in outcomes. So the roadmap that came out of the first 18 months of listening and research was energy literacy that is co-designed bottom-up. Yeah, you can tell us what you think we should know. We'll tell you that's bullshit. And they do. In fact, they tell me when I'm putting things on the table, saying, you know, it might be important for you to include this. Nah. Please, keep it simple. They also told us, don't assume that we are literate in our own language. The Afghan women recently reminded me in our social enterprise, I don't read and write in Dari. I didn't get the privilege of that. So it's about building a relational culture that is responsive to what they are telling us and organizing and building their leadership. And the other is to leave a legacy where our communities are more powerful, more capable, more resilient, and influential in getting things done for them. And 7 years later, we started organizing in 2017. I can honestly say they are. So the energy literacy program is a bedrock. Nobody would fund it. And so we went with a begging bowl to the energy companies. And luckily for us, it aligned with some of their priorities around vulnerable customers. I don't see my community as vulnerable. I just see them as structurally and systematically excluded and unable to exercise influence and power. But they're happy to wear the vulnerable hat if it means they can get some funding. So we have an energy literacy program that's now been running for 3 years. It was initially funded by 5 of the energy companies, Gemini, AGL, Ausgrid, Endeavour, and I'm missing someone. Anyway, AGL is no longer there. And considering the energy companies and their profit margins, how much do they fund it? $20,000, $30,000, and $50,000 each. So this is a program that maximizes my organization's capacity, which is we own the ground floor of the building in which we're located. All the staff are bilingual, and they give of themselves in a way that is now starting to worry me since the new regulations came in around people having a right to switch off. Because there's always this WhatsApp text message around, I just got a video. They're running a Mandarin speaking group energy literacy program today in Bexley, 30 plus people. They're so excited they sent me a video. So, I'm saying, guys, you just got to remember you have a right to switch off now. So that's what we're doing. We're also working on the other parts of that roadmap. People said that they wanted to do something about having access to clean, affordable energy. What we looked at is, with the experts, how would that happen for renters? Okay, solar for people who own their own homes, but people have really high mortgage stress in southwestern Sydney. And then there are renters, and there are no minimum energy standards. So we've been working across this whole holistic approach, working simultaneously on all of those priorities. So we partnered with Better Renting and a group within the Alliance that's working on minimum energy standards. We're also working to see how we might be able to give access to renewables to people who are renting in Western and Southwestern Sydney. So solar gardens, and we looked at the haystacks model and said to people, it's just taking off. You might want to understand that. And information is knowledge, knowledge is power. We wanted them to have the information and to make the choices based on what fitted for their household. One of the things that I keep hearing that I wanted to just put out there is this thing about trust. My thing is, why should they trust government and why should they trust people who don't reflect them? Why should they trust the companies that they ring up, the energy companies, and want to talk about their energy bill, but they can't get a translator? There's nobody at the other end. And there's no callback. So the frustration levels are quite high at the moment because people have a cost of living crisis. And for the people that we work with, our communities, that cost of living crisis is so real. It's about, do I pay my energy bill, which is $1,200? This is an Afghan family with 12 people living in a 3-bedroom household with 4 portable air conditioners in one of the hottest and most horrible suburbs in Western Sydney. They didn't know that those 4 portable air conditioning units would blow out their budget, and they can't feed themselves if they pay that energy bill. And the EPA voucher is $50. That's not going to make any difference to this family. What do we do? Is energy a human right? What a load of crap. It's not in this country, okay? People tell us they've not had energy in their home. It's been cut off. A woman with 5 children had a debt collection agency chasing her. Everywhere that she moved, somebody turned up at her door asking her. She had what's called sexually transmitted debt. Her ex-partner stayed in the home that they were renting when she escaped the domestic violence, and the bill was in her name, but he actually was the person who used all that energy, and he went for it. So she has a debt that she inherited from a domestic violence relationship, and she's terrified. She's of Tongan background, she has 5 children, single parent, and she keeps saying to us, what are you going to do for me? I don't know what to do for her. She has a debt collection agency chasing her for her debt. I'm sure that this is a reality in other communities as well. The other thing that people are wanting is they want the government and energy companies to understand that they're not getting a good deal. They live in some of the hottest places and they're not energy resilient, right? Energy resilience to them is something else than what it might be for you. They can't afford to rent a home that is actually got any minimum standards because there are no minimum standards. They can't afford to turn the air conditioning on, and they're elderly and very young. In that household of 12, there's a grandma in her 80s. Actually, she's a great-grandma. And there's a baby who's less than 3 months old. And they can't keep cool in summer. So do we have the solutions? No. We might be small and mighty, but we need to work with other people, with other groups, to bring about the change that's needed. I think I can stop now.
Yeah.
I'm happy to come back and talk about it.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll hear more about it, and I want to unpack some more you said as well, Asha. And Simon, moving over to you, because you work with small businesses as Business New South Wales, and I think it's sometimes the area as well, they get told small businesses, they get left behind in this transition as well, they're a bit too hard, and once again, as some of the things, like, they're running small businesses, they're all different types, it can be retail, it can be, so many different options. Can you just talk about your program and what actually works and how you actually make the difference with small businesses?
Yeah, happy to. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Donna. Thank you for ECA for the opportunity to speak this morning. I think from our perspective, the policy landscape for support for small businesses at the moment is looking pretty threadbare, and we're keen to see more being done precisely to fill that gap and avoid small businesses being left behind. The last Commonwealth budget, the big initiative that was announced, the Small Business Energy Incentive, a tax rebate for energy efficiency measures that small businesses could implement, a one-year program. As of the last time I checked, I'm pretty sure it still hasn't been legislated yet, and it will lapse in July. This is not the way to get small businesses engaged with making energy improvements. A program that only lasts 3 or 4 months in a best case scenario is not going to reach out to anybody who wasn't already making plans to invest or to improve their energy performance. And so this was really an indication of how short-termist thinking has been in the small business-facing policy area. Similarly, the previous year, the big initiative, a rebate for small businesses' energy bills, federal and state co-funded, a sugar hit, certainly welcome, but no lasting consequence from that. It came and went. Since 2022, when the Business Energy Advice Programme, which, full disclosure, Business New South Wales operated on behalf of the Commonwealth Government, that programme lapsed. Nothing yet has been brought in to fill that gap at either a federal or a New South Wales level. And so there isn't really anything out there right now for assistance for the small business community. The work that was recently done by Energy Consumers Australia looking at small business attitudes kind of shows the problem here. Around 62% of the businesses they surveyed thought that energy costs were a concern, but half of them haven't looked for any solutions. 70% said they hadn't heard anything from external sources. Most small businesses have got better things to do than try and figure out their energy problems. There's a lot going on in the world, and there has been over the last few years, and so this hasn't been a priority. So finding a way to reach out, to get into those businesses, to be able to have a conversation with them that meets them where they are is really important. And I think there's a lot of similarities to the other types of programs that have been described. It does require going in person. It does require having conversations. It does require tailoring messages, providing simple, enactable solutions to the questions that come up. And it means not shaping messages around the interests and proclivities of the person who's delivering the message, but rather the person who is the audience for that message. We want to see a new energy advice program targeting small business sector introduced. We think there are lessons that can be learned from the first round of the Business Energy Advice Program, the BEAP, that could be expanded on in a future program. More focus on the conversation around energy transition and not just a limit to how do you save money today. That's something that we're continuing to ask the federal government to support. But right now, as I said, the landscape is pretty bare, and so we do want to see more brought in to help bring small businesses along the journey that everybody else is taking.
Thanks, Simon. I'll dig into that. And this is when I have to go, oh, that's right. I haven't told everyone to put in your questions, but if you've been here this morning and yesterday, you know that you should be at the moment putting your questions into the app, because we will be actually getting to them. And just following on you, Simon, and it is consistent, and we've had this over the last two, like yesterday as well, like we need to reach communities. We have to make this work community focused and outcomes focused. But at the moment, we are still stuck, and I'm just taking up your point yesterday as well as Alison, like how do we actually give political power to what we actually need? And the work that Michael was talking about this morning from Portland as well. We need independent organisations or state, government-run organisations to do longer-term programs who are doing community engagement. We need it actually so the communities are involved. There's small businesses, there's communities in remote places of Northern Territory, in Western Sydney, in different parts of ACT. They're all going to have different needs. We need to do that co-design. Yeah. How do we actually get there? How do we make this a political decision so we're all committing, so we can work with the energy sector to actually get real community engagement onto the table? What is it? Why is it we're still not doing it? Like Simon, you've run programs that work. We've all done different programs that work. And the main thing is there's no long-term funding to do this. How do we actually get this onto the political agenda? How can we get a minister to go out and make an announcement and they're not in a hard hat and they haven't got high vis on? What is actually missing to do this? And I'm going to actually throw it back to you, Simon, because this is your last day in this role, so I was hoping that you might actually go off the leash a little bit.
Look, I think that's part of it. We've seen a willingness within energy departments, state and federal, to spend billions of dollars on big infrastructure investments, and yet a program like the BEAP that was a little over $10 million over 3 years, this is not big in the energy department budget terms. Something like that doesn't get renewed, doesn't get revived. Well, I think from our point of view, there is a massive amount of importance on the independence part of this. The feedback that we got throughout the BEAP was how valuable it was for somebody to be coming in and not trying just to sell something, to actually be impartial, to be neutral about what the different options that might have been available to that business would be. And so whether that's government, whether that's a sort of very arm's length from the industry funding model, something that can preserve over a longer amount of time than just 3 years, that independent voice into the sector, I think that's the only way that you're going to get the trust that is required here.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add on?
Yeah. I think for us, we've now trained 800 migrant communities across the diversity of Western and Southwestern Sydney in the energy literacy program. We've engaged with thousands of community members. The longevity of our program has been due to the commitment of the migrant community leaders, including myself, when it's been unfunded. My organization carried it for a while from its reserves. And that's because I'm able to speak to the value of it, to the importance of it. I wonder what will happen when I leave, though, because inevitably I will leave my paid job. I can't wait. I'm tired of working 12-hour days. I'll continue to do this work, but I'm only paid for 7 hours out of that 12. And if you've worked in the community sector, there is no funding for community development anymore. It is not valued. So I'm asking the academics in this room to actually do something about the research that is related to how do you build community resilience? How do you have communities that are able and ready and in relationship with each other to mobilize and to take action when they face those disasters like a heat wave, like a flood, and who actually are able to come up with local solutions and are shovel ready, as the saying goes, you know? And this work is around building relationships of trust. In this kind of setting of working with migrants are highly organized, but they're only highly organized in their little silos. Mm-hmm. They're highly organized around faith, around culture, around celebration, around food, around the things that matter to them, that helps them to remember who they are and what they value in terms of their cultural identity and their faith. We take that as a strength, and we work with that, and we organize them across diversity. And then they're highly organized and in solidarity. And when there is a challenge to that, we acknowledge it, like the current war in Palestine. The Jewish Board of Deputies, the National Imams Council, they're all members of the Alliance. What we do is we acknowledge this is a really difficult time. We talk to individual leaders. But that work is not funded. Every year I've gone with a begging bowl to the energy companies and to the government to fund the work that we're doing. We've met with Penny Sharp, we've met with the federal minister, Chris Bowen, continuously saying, this is really important work, please fund it. We've done proposals, so many proposals that I'm like a bit sick of it now. We're meeting with Jihad Dib tomorrow. 2 Muslim community leaders are coming to that meeting. We want a community energy hub. That is the one-stop shop, okay? Please, don't set up a one-stop shop, because it'll be a one-size-fits-all and it won't fit our communities. It won't fit your community.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They will not come to you. The small businesses, it's through the energy literacy program that we've been able to engage with the Chinese tradies. And we set up a WeChat group, because one of our staff, Lena, is from mainland China, and all of those mainland Chinese people who've come here, many of their qualifications are not recognized and their English is lousy. So instead of struggling for 10 years to get mastery of English, they've set up these trades, and they're small businesses. So the work is happening, but nobody's funding it. Mm. Don't fund us for a year, please.
Yeah. Yeah.
I might add to that as well, yeah. So I think we can all probably in our various pockets of the issue understand that the lack of coordination between policy and funding at the federal, state and local government levels is pretty abysmal, and we understand obviously that this transition's hit us hard and fast, so some of that's the catch up, but you know, we're requiring that there should be solar on social housing, and we're not making sure that the government institutions that manage social housing are actually empowered and enabled and thinking about giving permission to put those assets on rooftops. So if you can't even get permission from social housing to add a new asset class to their portfolio, that whole initiative dies. O&M doesn't get funded very often. If it does, it's not for very long. And if you're not building a consistent pipeline of funding and regulation from feasibility through to O&M, you will not have a consistent pipeline of shovel-ready products that allow this transition to continue. So the First Nations Clean Energy Network was established a couple of years ago. It's auspiced by Original Power. And as a result of 2 years of lobbying government and doing roundtables with communities all around Australia, the First Nations Clean Energy Network is now co-designing the First Nations National Clean Energy Strategy with the federal government. So we really invite anyone in this room that has any interest in energy and in this transition to make sure that you're figuring out how you're engaging First Nations issues and challenges and topics and engage it through that strategy. It's hard fought for, hard won. It is not easy to do. It's not easy to do. So while we have that opportunity, I really invite everyone in the room to take that up. So I'd...
Could I add?
Of course.
As well? So I guess ACT has the advantage of having very long-term policy certainty. So we've been operating in this environment for a very long time, and we're only talking about things that we're standing up. You know, we've had things stood up, but we're only having a coordinated approach now. So we recognise that we have so much further to go in what we do, and I wanted to acknowledge, I've talked about not just, every household is different, but really how we're targeting general households, and there's so many things we're looking at for different types of communities, and what to do there. And, you know, but it's taken 15 years for us to get here. And a conversation I had was, well, actually, I'm still fighting for more funding to let me continue the work that we're doing, and having to prove the data of this is actually working, we're heading in the right direction. I would like to also say that I'm a first generation migrant who happens to be a giant energy nerd. And I get to lead the work that ACT government is doing. And that's really important, because the diversity of what we're rolling out, how we engage and educate, is not a one size fits all. So we, as part of our education program, and you know, ACT has very different demographics to lots of other parts of the of Australia. So we're designing it to suit our community. So one of the things we did stand up was, you know, induction cooking classes. So we asked a very well-known Indian chef to do one and a very well-known Chinese chef to do one, because they are, through our research, the highest users of gas within their households for cooking, which doesn't actually use a lot of gas, but that's going to be that last obstacle for households. It's the hearts and minds, and I'm actually sporting a burn from me cooking on my gas stove last week. So let's talk about, I mean, I still have gas in my house. Correct, correct. But, you know, we have to design in a way that suits, you know, those who are change ready, but change ready still has so many different layers that government needs to address. But we are 15 years ahead of lots of other jurisdictions, and we're only getting to this point now. So I'm very aware of that.
And I think it's like, and it's come across in this panel yesterday, community engagement and doing this in-depth co-design, longer-term work. It's not because it's a nice thing to do and it's nice and fluffy, we're talking community. It will not work if we do not do this. Like, we actually need to get this into our programs and our policies, otherwise we are not going to get to the outcomes from all those personas that we did yesterday and the importance of that. I just also want to get back, like, I think you've already talked about it as well, Asha, but I can't remember, there's someone in this room, and I'm going to tell this story, probably mixing it up, but one-stop shops. I think they put into one-stop shop in the GPT chat, like, what was a one-stop shop for energy look like? And I think the answer is this magical, mystical place where everything gets resolved and everything's all fine. What do we think about one-stop shops? I'm going to say shops, and like, how can we actually get them to work? I know, Asha, you've already said a bit more, but yeah, especially Simon, may start with you. What does it even mean?
Well, I think recent work that, again, that ECA has put out indicates that for the small business community, at least, this is more something that sits potentially in the background and is working with partners that actually have those relationships with businesses more directly, and which have the kind of specialist understanding of what goes on within those businesses. So if you've got an entity that can provide the energy expertise and input into peak trade associations, into place-based business organizations, so the state and local chambers of commerce, community and diaspora type business organizations, which there are a lot of as well. Most of these organizations do not at the moment have much, if any, energy expertise within them. And so having some external place where that information can be sourced from, I think, is useful. But they do have the relationship with the businesses themselves, and they do have built up trust with the businesses themselves. And so if you try to circumvent that channel to try and create something new, I think it would struggle to get traction. And it's been said a number of times on both days, a one-stop shop mustn't be one size fits all. I mean, that is very clearly true in the small business sector, where the diversity of uses is so great that there is a bit of low-hanging fruit still out there, and we shouldn't over-assume that businesses have already done everything that's at the easier end of the spectrum. Some of that information is still useful, but once you get to the next level of sophistication, just the amount of knowledge that requires from the advisor's point of view, let alone sort of more organizationally, becomes very demanding. And so yeah, I think that's how we would see it, as something that can work in partnership with other organisations with pre-established relationships.
And I think Erin was right, like first stop shop is a better way of discussing that. And I mean, just to articulate the diversity of issues that Indigenous communities across Australia experience and how they orient to their communities' energy solutions. In the Northern Territory alone, what you experience in the Central Desert is not what you experience up in the tropics. It's not what the people in the Torres Strait Islands experience, where they know that the sea is going to rise and that their little islands aren't going to exist in however many years' time. In the community of Wujal, 30 years ago, they did a self-funded feasibility study for a hydro facility based on a waterfall that has sacred importance to them. And 30 years ago, for the last 30 years, government has said, no, we're just not going to approve that, we're not going to connect it. When you move over to WA, there are a lot of utility scale proponents coming over wanting to develop large-scale solar and wind farms on their land. So the question isn't about a community-driven project development model. It is, well, what does Indigenous land rights look like? How does that impact those projects, and how can we make sure there's good benefit baked in from the start with those agreements and partnerships? So yeah, the diversity just in the Indigenous population alone when it comes to energy means one-stop shops are not going to cut it. The process potentially is what you formalise and what you, I guess, start to have one or two different models of, making sure you're engaging community and taking that process. But anything much further than that, I mean, the very nature of the technology in this transition is that it's consumer driven. It's more democratic, it's more flexible, it's in the consumer's hands, and if you're trying to wrangle it into a one-size-fits-all, you've totally missed the point about what this transition could and should be about.
Erin, you want to add more?
I mean, I've said, how I think about what ACT government is doing is first stop shop, but I absolutely see a role for so many different types of one-stop shops, and we've set the policy intention and the agenda for one-stop shops to start up in the ACT. So I'm looking at some of my colleagues who operate in Canberra, but one-stop shop could be the meetings of the Montagues and Capulets of plumbers and electricians. Imagine if you could call them up, call up one place who offered both services, because you can't electrify without both of them. So a service that did the whole thing. I see that as a one-stop shop. Government has a role to provide information, impartial information, and that's why we partner with Choice. We do a lot of programs and outreach, but we're trying to push a community in one direction, and we see ourselves as, I guess, a concierge service as such, to really educate and then encourage that next step.
For us, we've worked on this mobile community energy hub idea, and it's really padded out now. Mm-hmm. We've got to go to them. People won't come to us. It's unrealistic to expect them to come to us. Where will they come anyway? To the CBD? They don't want to come to the CBD. In the things that we've taken community leaders, we've had to do a lot of prep with them before we could bring them into one of these swish hotels, right? They really feel out of place. And so we go to them. And if it's a minibus and the young people are going to paint it, they've already told me, so that it speaks to the people that want to own what happens there.
Yeah.
And the energy literacy program, the read your bill, the call the energy company that you need to call while we sit with you, because you're going to need to rehearse it so that you can escalate your dispute. If you want to do a complaint to the Ombudsman, that we help you to do that, because people that we worked with, they have some very legitimate things that should be going to the Ombudsman. Their complaints are pretty big, but they won't do the complaint. They're afraid of the consequence. They come from countries where the consequence would be massive. B, they lack the English language skills to articulate what they need to say. So we do that with them. So mediating organisations like ours, like the local temple, all of those places, the community centre. So it goes. And one of the things you need to do is to say, we'll be here and you're there, and you will be there on the days that you say you'll be there. So that's one of the things that's really important. And if you know about the caravan project at the Family Action Centre in Newcastle, that's how it began. It sent out staff to work with people, with families who were living in caravan parks throughout the Hunter, because they weren't going anywhere. They didn't have any wheels and they were poor as. And usually young people with children with multiple challenges. I used to work closely with that project, and I know how much success they had because they went and set up a play group in a caravan park and were just available that morning, once a month. And so for us, it's about partnering with all the neighbourhood and community centres, with the migrant resource centres, with the local temple, the church. You know, Auburn Uniting Church, Friday night, the whole family's there. We've gone and run a listening campaign there, and then we've also run energy literacy. The young people there are just chomping to do something because the climate change that they experience back home in Tonga, they want to do something about it here. And so that's our thing, is it has to be mobile, it has to go to them. Bilingual staff, please fund it properly so that we can actually get maximum benefit from the bilingual staff who work in it. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Asha. And I am going to get to the questions, don't run late, and it's not because I've forgotten my glasses and I can't read that screen just there and I'm going to have to turn around, but I have to turn around. Anyway, so what have we got? Maddie, I think you've got a couple here.
Yes.
So great to hear about the work, Madison. You can probably read this on your screen. How big an issue is maintenance and servicing of solar and other systems in remote areas? How does Original Power Communities, the local distributor, manage this issue? Oh, thank you.
Sure. So I might also lean on some work I did prior to Original Power as well. So prior to COVID, I was living and working between the US and Haiti, working on microgrids in rural and remote Haiti. The absolute benefit of solar is that you can train locals to maintain and operate locally. And that makes sure that in these remote areas, remote settings, you have more of a resilient system. It can get back up online quicker. Now, if it's something that requires an engineer, for example, we have this wonderful thing called FaceTime, even in remote Haiti. And sometimes FaceTime works better in remote Haiti than it does regional Queensland, so think about that. And we have just had engineers from Germany, from SMA, just coach our local staff in Haiti how to reset their inverter, how to get everything back up online. So, and you know, of course there's a hierarchy of the complexity of the issue, and if it triggers something beyond what a German FaceTime call can solve, then we fly someone out. But you are able to resolve, once the systems, you know, I guess wobbly bits have all been tweaked, generally speaking, you're able to resolve most of it locally. But that does require really great skills and training from the get-go, built into the funding of the project from the start. With our Nara project, so that's based in a community called Borroloola. We're building a community microgrid that will be grid connected. What's already there is a diesel generated remote network. Power and Water Corporation owns and manages that. What we've already trialled and are building up across other smaller projects with Original Power is various training programs. We have a group of countrymen and women who are interested in learning, and we get them on the tools in various communities and projects. And what that means is by the time we've commissioned that microgrid, we will have a small local workforce ready to go to do that first and initial stage of O&M. So I actually think it improves the economics and the community benefit of these projects in remote communities if you have solar. Can't speak to wind, I have much less experience there. But yeah, I hope that answers whoever's question that was.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Maddie. Do you want to, and there's a next question as well for you. So what engagement and support do you need from networks in setting up power solutions in community?
Fantastic. So we're right in the development phase of our Nara microgrid, the Borroloola microgrid. And what I would say is we do not expect utilities to have the connection process sorted. We do not expect the connection studies and all of those steps that we need to be lights on ready. But what we do need to hear is that you're not just going to try and shove our project into your existing products and services, and then if it doesn't fit, then it just puts us on ice. Work with us, because chances are what we propose today, you're going to get about 12 of us in a year's time. And so the learnings you get through this process with us now is just going to set you up in the future. So I would definitely say the connections assessment process is really tricky. and slow, and you've got to find your champions and utilities who are willing to go on that journey with you. That's probably the biggest one. I think, don't be scared of us. We actually don't want to take over your whole network. No one wants that. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work that most communities don't want to take on. But what we can offer is a decarbonisation of your network where you don't own the asset. What we can offer is community benefit outcomes if we go for a co-ownership model that you don't have to fund. There's opportunities for CSO reductions there as well if you've got the feds breathing down your neck about how much of a CSO payment you're taking. If you structure it right, that's a partnership where we can actually help make sure there's mutual outcomes there. So just making sure that your existing products and services, if they aren't fit for purpose, don't treat us as an antagonist. We're your partner in solving what these fit for purpose products and services are.
Someone in the room, there's actually sounds like a pipeline that you can have a relationship about as well.
That'd be
Yeah, thanks. So this to you, Erin, but I might get Simon's thoughts as well. Do you think a version of the choice partnership could be applied to the small business community?
So choice as a product only review household products, and so we're very aware about how do we educate the small business community, and I have parents who are small business owners, so again, very acutely aware of that. So ACT Government do have a Sustainable Business Program, which is a one-stop shop for businesses to come in to actually engage on, so there's rebates, but it's also your energy transition, wastewater, transport. So it is essentially a one-stop shop for small businesses, and all small businesses are not homogenous. Mm-hmm. So we have a team of outreach officers who work specifically with businesses on bespoke options for them and what rebates are available. One thing we did have launched for small businesses, particularly those in hospitality, is rebates for commercial kitchens to transition off gas, and very purposefully looking at different types of kitchens. So there's a Chinese restaurant, there is a fried chicken restaurant. So really demonstrating and showing to the community, if you go to the restaurant and it doesn't taste any different, you can perhaps consider it at home.
You want to add?
Well, I agree with all of that. I think the one thing that I would add is, in a lot of business contexts, it's not just about the equipment, it's also about the business processes that go alongside that. And so having resources, advice, support that can ensure that the business processes are done in a way that gets the most out of any change in equipment or even existing equipment from an efficiency point of view, but also from a productivity and output, and the business just getting on with the business of doing business, if you like, is also really important. And I think we can get very focused on just, you replace one bit of capital with another, and that's kind of the end of the story. And in a lot of businesses, it really isn't.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Erin, I just got a couple more here, but I'm not going to do all the Erin questions because you can come and talk to Erin afterwards. So are consumers from other states able to use the ACT online tool to help advise their electrification strategy and make a plan?
Look, Choice would probably say no because we've only paid for a licence for ACT, but there is nothing to stop you. I guess my hopes and dreams when we created this tool is if it got used, or a version of a tool like this got used in other jurisdictions, that's my ultimate outcome. There are so many tools that exist. I guess it's agreeing as an industry around what is the most common way to educate our consumers about the best way to transition. We think this has worked really well, but there are other comparable tools.
And I might just give a little plug as well. So from the local government sector I'm in, we actually have a community of practice of over 100 councils from across Australia on how we do best practice on communicating electrification to our communities. And through that community practice, we've actually developed how to make a plan. We've got them for most of the states, or at least on the eastern seaboard at the moment. So check out your local council website. They've either got a how to make a plan. If they don't, tell them that they should get one. Just going to come a bit something here about one for you, Asha. It's like, what are you hearing from communities you work with about what they need in the energy transition beyond the excellent energy literacy program?
Oh, heaps. they, they want access to renewables. And if they're renting, they want some way in which pressure can be applied to their landlords to do something about the fact that their homes are not energy efficient, that they actually don't have any standards. So if you ever live, I live in a rental in Sydney. It's a beautiful heritage listed house in Dulwich Hill that's been divided up into 8 self-contained units. My place is so hot because it faces west that I can't sleep there at night. Sometimes I think I should just put down a mattress at work and sleep there because there's no air conditioning and there's no incentive for the landlord, who's a developer, to actually do anything about that house being so hot in summer and so cold in winter. So our communities are telling us they want access to renewables. They don't know who to trust. So we do things with them in this energy literacy program that's beyond literacy. We sit with them and we walk them through how they might get 3 quotes. We share stories. So sharing stories is so important, right?
Yeah.
We ask people, has anybody here got solar? How did you go about getting it? What did you learn about the process? What was it like? Was it worth the investment? How much money have you saved? So every one of those energy literacy programs is actually about getting the expertise in the room, shared with others. People are also wanting to understand what they can do about the fact that there is no shade in their local environment. So we've got a youth engagement officer at the moment working with us through the ECA funded program, who's working with the schools in Campbelltown, in Blacktown. And those schools, the young people want to do something about planting trees and getting shade in those suburbs. And I was listening to the program around Spain and heat waves, and I want an app for these kids so they can map the shade. Everybody knows about those horrible heat traps in those suburbs. What they want is to do something. And if we can map the shade and we can work with local councils, they want to do some tree planting and have shade in their suburb. So there's a great willingness for people to do something, take action, but they do not want to be consulted without outcomes. They don't want their cultural expertise to be taken for granted. And they don't want to be surveyed. We just tried running a survey. We just thought we'd test it. We've been in relationship with these communities for so long. We thought they might get better uptake of that survey. No. So many people started the survey, didn't bother finishing it. We sent it out far and wide. We can't get 100 responses. And yet we're in relationship with over 10,000 people. Don't survey them. Because it's so dehumanized and impersonal. You'll get better outcomes if you actually build a relationship with them. And it's in your interest, I'd suggest, to understand what the strengths are within your organizations. I had a beautiful story yesterday from, I can't remember who it was it Alison? Around looking to see that you had somebody on your staff who could speak a community language. So when people say they're a hard to engage community, I go, really? Just look to see, do a map of all your staff and ask them how many languages they speak. Most of the time, people don't feel culturally safe to admit that they speak more than one language, English, okay? Cultural safety is really important. I came here in 1974. It's 50 years. I was just a girl, and people told me, get rid of the accent, stop eating garlic. I was like, I've entered hell. Right? Get rid of the accent and stop eating garlic. Because if you want to be like one of us, that's what you have to do. I'm still not like one of you. I still get asked where I come from.
So
my kids are born here, and they get asked where they come from. When my son said Newcastle, this guy on the train said to him, listen, son, don't be a smartass. He went, I'm from Newcastle. And he said, if you don't stop being a smartass, I'm going to punch you out. So he went, I better move to the next carriage. And he texted me, Mom, I think this guy's going to beat me up. Like, where does he come from? Newcastle. Okay? And I always say to people, how far back do you want me to go? Because the British took my people to Fiji. We are colonized, dispossessed, dislocated people. If you've got a few hours, I'll tell you all about it. but you won't feel good afterwards because it's your ancestors who did that. So that idea of sanitizing this work, please don't sanitize it. It's not easy work. There are no easy solution. It's not one size fits all, but it's amazing work. It's bloody amazing.
Yeah, and I think the really important point of the storytelling as well that comes through Asha, and we might play something at the end, a little bit of work that we've been doing on that storytelling too. I've got a question here, and it's sort of a bit of a follow-on, and I think this is the crux of it. There's so many great initiatives. How can we reduce duplication and ensure that we can scale it up and roll it out more broadly? But aren't we just been talking about that? We can't do things more broadly. There's this tension here about how do we scale up, but how we can actually make sure that it is not one size fits all. I'm just wondering if you get thoughts from, I don't know, Erin, you want to go first? Sorry.
It's a topic that I'm really passionate about, and where do I even start? I think, I use my parents as a great example. They are lifelong renters. Yesterday I spent most of the day trying to get a generator for their house in Melbourne because they don't have power. They don't know what to do. They're not energy literate. And I think at the heart of this, we've talked about energy literacy. I don't think any of us understands what energy literacy, or we don't have a shared understanding or a shared vision or view of what energy literacy is. And it means so many different things to different communities. And that's why some things can't be scaled out. But I think the environment or the communications and education environment is actually really cluttered. There's no singular message around what does an energy transition mean. We've tried to do things within the ACT to control that. So at a household level, we've sort of simplified that message from a household perspective to, what's your Maslow's hierarchy of needs of transition? You plug the hole, seal the gaps, get off gas. And really simplifying that message, and here's the supports. But there's so many resources. I would love to see a far more coordinated approach around where do I get my education, what's my trusted resource, because there's 20,000, right? So where do I go?
I think as well, if you're a developer, don't be afraid to share your learnings. I think everyone grows quicker, the barriers reduce quicker if you're sharing what you've experienced. I think we have way too many meetings weekly, Lauren, on the books where we're chatting with other people trying to do the same things elsewhere in the country, but it is great because each week we'll find a little thing we've picked up or something else that someone else has picked up that might be that little shortcut. And it is almost a war of attrition sometimes, as well as project developers, where you just keep pushing up against this wall and you just know one day it's going to fall. But the only way it does is if you do have multiple projects from multiple angles just going and going. But that knowledge sharing is critical. And again, I'll harp onto the First Nations Clean Energy Network, but that really is a aggregated community of insights and a coordination of voices from community that is then elevated to federal government. And then the learnings and the responses at the federal level are the intentions, hopefully, that they'll trickle down to state. So really going grassroots to federal and then to state. So I think, the network, I know we're tooting our own horn a little bit, but I'm really proud of that team. They've done an incredible job at it. It is, you just have to commit to coordinating and stick to it.
Well, I'm not sure I entirely agree with the premise of the question. I think, at least in the small business world, we're a long way away from duplication being really the problem.
Since there's nothing going on at the moment.
There's nothing happening. That's right.
Nothing to duplicate.
The shortage of engagement is much more a problem than over-engagement, I think. Scaling up isn't a dead simple thing, but right now, again, we're in a landscape where support for small businesses is being scaled down, but just keeping a steady state would have been an improvement. The BEEP managed to hit 7% of all the eligible businesses in the entire country in a 3-year window during the biggest economic disruption this country has ever faced, because it was delivered during the middle of COVID. There is an opportunity there to hit a lot more businesses just by doing the same thing had the funding been maintained. So, I take the point. There are certainly a lot of great initiatives, but I think we can do a lot more before we need to start worrying about duplication being the problem.
Yeah, and I think it sounds like what they actually need is we need the structure of that narrative and that vision, but also we need the funding, the consistent funding over a number of years so we can actually roll it out. But the actual on-the-ground rollout has to be a bit more community-driven from a lot of the programs that we've been talking about today. Asha, you got anything more to say?
Yeah, are any of you old activists like me, think global, act local? Yeah? Oh, I feel better. So, if you're looking at key learnings from our program, it would be you need to use these key things around building relationships with local people, see where they meet, is there a local pub that they all go to, is there a church, is that church where most people go, is there a community centre? So there are key learnings around building relationships, working with existing leaders who are trusted in that community, and then adapting the program that may have worked elsewhere to be responsive to the local community, and leaving a legacy where they are better off, more powerful, more ready, more engaged than when you started. But if you can build the local capacity, then you're doing justice to the work that you're meant to be doing. Don't take people from the city to work in the regions. Don't take experts to Aboriginal communities and not leave a legacy for Aboriginal communities where they have ownership of it. What solution works for one community won't work for another. The coordinator of our program, Nirmal, his community are from Kerala. Do not translate anything into Malayalam. People from Kerala are educated, highly educated. They are educated in English. They take great pride in the fact that they speak English and they got entry into this community, into this society as self-funded migrants, okay? If you translate, what you're saying is, none of what you did is worth it. I don't read in my own language. I'm totally educated in English. I only speak Hindi. I would just feel a massive wound opening up if you translate things for my community. Most of us do not read in our own language. So don't assume you know. Ask. People will tell you. Don't waste your money translating, please. Fund interpreters, because you'll just be wasted.
Yeah. And it sounds like, fund people in those communities who can actually do that job already. And
leave a lasting legacy.
Yeah. I just want to say a big thank you for our three panellists. It's a time for us to do a bit of a clap. So thank you very much, Asha, Erin, Maddie and Simon. And we're going to finish up on a video. It's just on a program that we've been running at Merri-bek, and it picks up on a number of things that we've been talking about, but especially it's saying Asha about storytelling and how important storytelling is as the best way of communication rather than doing a flyer and other things. But also there's people in our community who are better at telling the story than we are. So Maria, who you're about to hear from, she's our influencer. She's the best influencer. Rick, he's gone. Whoa, there, yeah, I've got one. Yeah, her name's Maria, and she is probably the best person to actually sell our program. So hit it.
I had insulation put up on the top of the roof. It was a good thing to do. When I read the ad in your local paper, and it said, it does help, and the lady was very happy. And I said, if she's happy, I think I will be happy too. And I think it's the best thing that I came up with. The difference that it's made, it's comfortable, especially in summer. I hate summer. Yeah. Winter I can put a jacket on, but summer it's terrible for me. So this, keeps everything down nice and clean, comfortable for the summer. I have to go through the winter, but I think it will be just as good. Yeah, just have it done. The people who actually looked after the job and done the job, it was the best people that I come across. I felt very comfortable. I felt like if I was with my brothers. Yeah, so have no fear. They're great people.
We just need more Marias. We just need to fund them more in our local communities, and they'll actually, as she says, they'll just get it done. Yeah. So thank you.